366 SNP, your host, Sandra here. And today we are joined by Dr. Lindsay Hill. She is a DNP, psychiatric nurse practitioner, entrepreneur, educator, all the things, transforming mental health care. She's the founder of the PMHNP Bootcamp and the co-founder of the Psych NP network. She also is the owner of Clear Care, her own psychiatric private practice. She got her bachelor's in nursing from Cedarville University in Ohio, DNP from Arizona, and she is passionate about community healthcare. That's how she started, and that grew as she started noticing that the students in her area could get better care with the appropriate psychiatric support and treatment, and that really allowed her to really start going into helping them through their healing journeys. And I want to shout out to my boy, Garrett Sobavaro, the student that asked for me to find a psychiatric nurse practitioner. This one is for you, buddy. So thanks for listening to all you guys. Again, message me if you want somebody special. But Dr. Lindsay, thank you for coming onto the podcast today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. I'm Lindsay Hill, and I've been a Psych NP for 10 years now, actually, which is kind of crazy to think about.
So tell me, Lindsay, a little bit about yourself, kind of what drew you to the field of psychiatric nursing.
In my undergrad, I was in Ohio and I did a rotation in Dayton, Ohio. And I was like, I do not think psychiatric nursing is for me because this is just kind of like getting me down. Like, I feel like these people aren't actually getting better. And we're just kind of like, here's some pills. And I was like, no way that I would do this. And so I had just kind of written off like psych nursing altogether. And then I moved from Ohio to Arizona as a new grad nurse, and I had a really hard time finding a job. I couldn't, because I didn't have connections. I hadn't done clinicals locally that like, it seemed like all the hospitals wanted experience. Anyway, I ended up meeting someone through Craigslist. I was buying a couch and super random. He's like, we might be hiring a community health nurse at Arizona State University. And I was like, amazing. Like, I'm nannying. I really need to get some nursing experience, like time is ticking, you know? And so anyway, I ended up getting hired on there in their like health services at Arizona State University. And they had a few psych NPs who were employed there. And I was just like hooked from the beginning. I was like, this is so cool. Like this role.
What was it? What was it about the role that from like, you seeing the psychiatric NP role, you started to get interested in psych? Okay.
Yes. And it was like seeing these college students going from like not functioning well to like being able to function much better. And so I'm like, okay, well, clearly there's, you know, some treatment, something that they're doing different than like where I was at in Ohio when people weren't really actually like improving in their quality of life and things like that. So I just became fascinated, and I was like, Pam was the first one who worked there, which is really cool because she reached out to me not that long ago, and she's actually like who connected me to be like considered for the APNA chapter president situation, and I hadn't talked to her in years. So
is APNA like the psychiatric like nurse practitioner like governing body? Stop. So Pam from the very beginning has been along with you this whole ride.
Well, the thing is though, I didn't even talk to her pretty much for like the last 10 years since I've been actually practicing. Like so it was just kind of like crazy to hear from her. But I think it goes back to like the power of like just networking. I was just like from the beginning, like, can you just like teach me? Like, I just want to learn from you. Like, I got in trouble a few times for like shadowing with her when I was supposed to be out like doing my nursing duties, you know, but I was just like so into it from the beginning. So but I didn't think like, oh, I'm going to go back to school like right away. But I had this boss who was pretty like intense about like goal setting and where do you want to be in a year from now? Where do you want to be in 5 years from now? He ordered me this like 5-year planning book, and I'm like, well, I think this is what I want to do. And he's like, okay, well, like, what are we waiting on then? And I'm like, I think I need more experience. I think I need to get more confident. Like, he just really like challenged me to take action steps. Like the deadline had passed for people getting accepted into the DNP program. And like, it was a whole thing. I had to take the GRE in like a hot second. But yeah, he really like pushed me to kind of ask like, why would you wait? Like, you have a year of experience at this point. I got some kind of discouraging feedback as far as like, you should wait, you're going to get burned out. even from other psych NPs. And so that was like challenging because here I had like Pam who was like believing in me and just like, you've got this, like, you're going to be great. Like, you really care, but then kind of other people who were telling me, you're so young and, you should have more like psychiatric nursing experience. And so I was kind of torn, but at the same time, like, I just kind of followed my gut and I'm really happy that I did because I felt like I was kind of grandfathered in to like being able to be a graduate student while working there, like for the health services to be flexible with me because it's not convenient for them. You know what I mean? Like it's not their goal, I don't think, to hire people. It wasn't to also be like, students and so anyway, they were really great with me. And so I got like a tuition break because I was working there. And I'm just really happy that I did it when I did it because I paid for my own schooling and it was an opportunity that I'm happy that I jumped on. And I'm happy I didn't wait until I felt confident, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you start NP school, you get your DNP, you start working, you're walking through the preceptorship, you realize this is really what you love, even though you've been in community health and have had a ton of personal experience with psychiatric nursing, did find that this was rewarding. So for a student that's like, do I have what it takes to be a psych NP? How do I know if my radar is up on that? What do you recommend that a nurse practitioner? Because I know you run the boot camp and you're really into helping foster psych NPs. What would you want a psych NP student or one that's considering it to really start to search within their soul to figure out, this is something that I would be good at, I would enjoy?
Right. I think one of the things I did was just talking to other psych NPs and just being very curious about hearing their experiences. And I felt like that gave me a really good sense of, with different personality types, like how they managed the role and, if it was like super heavy on them or like what they did to manage their own mental health, that type of thing. If you can, like, network with psych NPs and be curious and ask them questions, I think that can go a long way. I think obviously if you can shadow somebody, that's ideal. It's harder to find those opportunities now when even just finding a preceptor is so difficult. So because in a sense, that is what I was doing. I did get opportunities to shadow the psych NP, but it was a unique experience, but I think a lot of people would have been scared to even express that that's what they wanted to do and then kind of like be a little bit risky in terms of actually like doing it. You know what I mean? But I just was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I just kind of sticking with that. Like, if you know that you have that heart for it and that passion for it, like letting that be known, because I think that part definitely matters for sure. It is a heavy emotionally type job situation. And I know that we had touched on briefly, even like finding your niche and like, if you're, very like spiritual or religious. And I grew up very conservatively, faith at the forefront, and faith is still very important for me. And so that was a concern for me as well, as far as like, is this gonna go against kind of like my faith beliefs? Like, do I buy in? Do I subscribe to like everything that like psychiatry is, or can I kind of like put my own spin on it, if you will, And I think that I've learned with experience how to do that more authentically, if that makes sense. Not being as scared to feel like, oh, I have to fit a certain mold of like what it looks like to be a psych NP. And I can really like make this like unique to who I am. I feel like that came with time, but there was a long period of time where I think I was more like, well, I'll just kind of be by the book, what I'm supposed to do. I've always kind of been like that, a rule follower. So I can do it in this field too. But anyway, I think it's really important in psych to bring your unique voice, to bring your kind of unique special sauce that makes you you. I think it's what actually kind of moves the needle a lot of times with patients. There's so much research that shows that it's like not the actual intervention we're using. Our antidepressants are not that effective. I mean, we need the placebo effect. We need the therapeutic connection and these other things to really make an impact. And so the authenticity piece, I honestly think, is a huge piece of this. So I think that if people have certain unique life experiences, be it military, be it their own personal experience with mental health, with family members, like not being afraid to use their voice to help other people because of the experiences they've gone through, because I guarantee you there are people out there who could really benefit from hearing their stories. And I think that I was just like scared to have a voice and put myself out there for many years. And I'm really glad that I ended up taking that risk, but it really took me not being employed for anybody to feel like I had the freedom to do that.
No, that's huge, because what you just said is the crux of it, right? So in order to feel that freedom to care in the way that you want to, you've got to separate yourself from somebody else's set of rules, right? And so just like you're saying, I kind of had to get away from a system and kind of create my own rules and how I was going to care for people, and realize, yeah, the medicine's there. I can use it as a tool in my toolbox, but these other things from my life experience, from my background, from my faith, these are things that I move in, and people want to connect to that. And so I think that's a really, really good point, because when we know that mental health in today's world is becoming more and more of an issue, it's got incredible demand on our system, and NPs contribute to moving the needle on access to care, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially in communities that don't have anybody out there. And so as a psych NP, kind of what is your role in these settings for a nurse or a nurse practitioner student that's just like, okay, so what can I expect as a psych NP? Like, some people work remotely, some people own their own practices, some people work in systems. Like, what is it that you really bring to the healthcare system as a psych NP?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. You can bring so many different things. Kind of like as a nurse, you can bring so many different things to the system. And I remember my dad always told me that, like, he wanted us all to be nurses. And he's like, there's so many things you can do within nursing. Like, you're never going to be bored. You could always pivot, but like, it's a secure, income stream, because my parents didn't go to college. And yeah, they just wanted us to kind of have some of those opportunities with job security and income and things like that. But anyway, I think that there are so many different ways that it can look for people to be a psych NP. If you're interested in long-term care, if you're interested in substance abuse, working in a residential or rehab, or even just like an outpatient practice that specializes in that area, you can really niche down in OCD and pediatrics. We are so used to, as nurses, being able to come alongside our patients and talk with them like person to person. And I think that relationship, like, it helps patients feel more comfortable to come see us, because I think that there's that like history in psychiatry of kind of like patriarchal, like hierarchical, like, I'm the provider and this is what I'm going to say. And then you can do it or not. But like, this is kind of how it is, where I think and I'm not saying all like psychiatrists are like that, or I'm not trying to generalize, but I think just psychiatry as a whole has had that tone in it and its history, right? And so I think that, like, as nurses, I think patients trust us kind of because they're like, well, we're kind of like used to like talking to our nurses and not feeling like they're like our parent and telling us that we have to do X, Y, and Z. And so, because I don't know, this is scary. I don't know if I want to take medications. Like, there's this fear, I think, of like, what is it going to be like to go see a psych provider? And, am I going to get like, I'm going to have to go inpatient if I'm truthful, or, what is it going to entail? But I think that there's this very collaborative and then also like holistic kind of integrative like aspect to us and like the fabric of who we are as nurses. And to kind of take that more like full person approach, I think is huge for psychiatry. Huge. We moved into kind of the biopsychosocial model, but I think too, just like who we are as people usually, just like it just lends really well to that role and to being able to help people in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. That trusting relationship between a patient and a nurse and is foundational to our degrees, right? Mm-hmm. We do it on the floor. We learn it as baby nurses, how to connect to our patients and create that trust, because we're with them in the worst times, right? Brene Brown, whatever about her politically, but I like some of the things she says. And one of the things she says is empathy is not sitting up from the pit and looking down in the hole and saying, it must be really dark in there. Gosh, it must be terrible. But it's actually getting down in the hole, sitting in the hole with the patient and looking up and going, it's dark in here. How are you doing? Like that trusting relationship we learn foundationally And then as the Psych NP, you begin to continue to build that relationship between the provider and the patient and to build that trust so that they can say, so I trust my nurse practitioner and she told me I need to start drugs because I'm in a kind of unsteady state. And she's going to continue to work with me through this process, get me off the medication, continue to help me work through my problems so that I can cope with whatever's going on. And in today's society, so many people hurting, not feeling heard. There's just so much heaviness that I feel like our role as providers in this space is so huge. And it's so important to be able to create that trust. Tell the nurse practitioner student or just a nurse practitioner, like, what are some tips and tools to build that trust between the provider and the patient that you've noticed in your practice and your time as, a Psych NP? What are some of the things that you encourage nurse practitioner students to foster that trust between the provider and the patient, which is tantamount to what you do? Attention, all nurse practitioners and NP students. Are you tired of feeling the disconnect between clinical rotations and didactic teaching? Say hello to Success NP's clinical booklet guides.
As NPs ourselves, we know how valuable it is to have a resource that helps bridge the gap between clinical and class. So we created the digital resource to do just that. Our clinical booklets cover 5 major NP tracks: Psych, Adult, Peds, Family, and Women's Health. Success NPs wants to create tools and provide support NPs need to thrive in their careers.
So why wait? Check out our Success NP Etsy shop, linked in the show notes, for our digital guides and other digital clinical resources. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is like showing up authentically as you, not being afraid to like put a little bit of flavor of your personality in there, like not feeling like you have to be so robotic. I made the mistake of like, because I wanted to be so thorough and accurate in terms of like going through all the questions I needed to in a psych eval, I think there were plenty of times where I probably made the patient feel like more of just like a number. And it's like the patients put in a lot of effort to even get this appointment with you. Trust me, it's less important that you asked every single question on the psych eval and more important that they feel that you actually like care about them as a person.
Yes.
And so I didn't understand that fully because I was like, well, my charts get audited. And also like, isn't that just like what you do as a good like psych NP is like, you do ask every question. And what if you miss something? And then there's the liability. But like patients can feel that when you're putting that kind of over like the therapeutic relationship. And so I think being able to really show them that that's what's most important, that you actually care about them as a person, that it's their body, it's their brain. I remind people of that all the time. This is your choice, unless you're working in a setting where it's court ordered treatment, we need their buy-in, because who would want to continue to take a medication, pick up a medication, pay for a medication, go to these appointments with something that could be causing them more harm? Like we need them to be involved in the treatment aspect. Sure. So I think those are some things. If you're working with kids, like my friend Rachel, who does the network with me, she always has cute tips about like bringing up your pet or like, or their pet. Just like these little like personable little nuggets that you can do with like kids to connect. And I think that's always fun too. There was another thing, this is kind of like off on another tangent, but that confused me as a student when it came to like being a psych NP. And that was do we do therapy? Do we not do therapy? Like I'm kind of getting I'm hearing mixed things from my mentors. I had different mentors who I really looked up to. And some of them said different things in terms of like, well, we used to have more therapy, like curriculum and do more of that. And we don't anymore. And it's like really too bad. And then just like different opinions on what that looked like. And so that kind of like confused me. And I think it confuses other people still. Like
when you say therapy, what do you mean?
Because you'll hear in this job, you're expected to bill for brief psychotherapy. And that's usually how they kind of refer to it. And then in these different programs also, like there is a therapy component as far as sometimes people are doing, an IOP where they're learning CBT and motivational interviewing. Like every program's a little bit different in terms of like.
So you're talking cognitive behavioral therapies, different types of modalities of therapy where you are working to change the patient's thinking. Is that kind of?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. We're with you. I'm with you. I'm following you. Keep going.
Yeah. So, but that kind of threw me. And so I just was always like super interested in it, but I didn't really understand how it fit into my identity as a Psych NP. And it really has taken me a lot of time to even figure out what that looks like. But I had a unique experience when I was in school because I had said like, hey, if there is clinical experiences to do different things with therapy, like I'm your girl, put me in, coach.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, yeah, there's this really unique experience to do DBT at the Phoenix Indian Medical Center. And I'm like, okay.
So deep brain stimulation.
So dialectical behavior therapy. It's similar to cognitive behavior therapy, but it's more so CBT focuses on changing your thinking first, and then your behavior changes after the fact, where DBT focuses more on changing your behavior first, and then your thinking usually changes after the fact. And it's more of a balance between like change skills and like validation and acceptance skills. And so like I had been to like traditional CBT therapy as a patient while I was in school, and I found it like a bit invalidating. And granted, I'm sensitive. I have big emotions. I'm sensitive. Like, and I just felt like, okay, I can't make these changes. Like if I could, like I would, but like this knowledge isn't really like changing my behavior. And so then I would just kind of like stop going type thing. But in this DBT situation, I thought I was just going to get in there and like co-lead the groups with these like, adolescents who were like chronically self-harming. And I'm like, I'm pretty high functioning and I'm in grad school. I'm in a doctoral program in my 20s. Well, they had another thing coming for me. They're like, no, you're actually going to be a participant with them for like 16 weeks. And I'm like, really? Okay. And she had told me, like, I interviewed for this rotation, like, you're going to have homework, like, it's going to be intense. So I was kind of intimidated by her, but I was like, I need to learn from this lady. I can tell. So I was like, okay. That was huge for me. That experience has like shaped a ton for me, because here's like this Yale graduate. Like, I mean, she's super, I still think the world of her, look up to her. And here she is like modeling like this vulnerability and modeling these like coping skills and like telling me inadvertently, like it's okay to like be human, and like it's okay to like have these hard emotions, and like it's not like an us versus like them. Like we are all human, like we all struggle, like, and I had never really understood, I guess, fully kind of the function of emotions and how the lengths that I would go to avoid painful emotions. Shopping, different unhealthy coping skills. Not that shopping can't be a healthy coping skill, but in extremes,
yes,
right?
I know what you're saying. Yes.
When you're going into debt or whatever, a lot of people have these unhealthy coping skills, whether we're like using alcohol or sex, drugs, right? It's like people use different things for that immediate relief, when I think if we were being taught in schools kind of like the function of emotions, and that like it's actually okay to have these painful emotions, and here's how we navigate those. So I became very passionate about like, why aren't we learning this stuff in schools? And just kind of the platform of like DBT. So that's a big piece of what I teach my patients and what my platform is about too. Like the incorporation of brief psychotherapy into our role and into being able to help patients more.
Yeah, that is so awesome. What I hear from what you're saying is that the role of the nurse practitioner in mental health is humanizing people, right? Kind of going back to, there's a checklist of questions. I got to make sure I get to the right diagnosis. There's that aspect of it. But what you're really finding in your journey through psychiatric nursing that I'm hearing is people are people. And you're one of those people. And you need to be yourself in that space as you treat and care for people, because that allows them to be vulnerable. As you work out your vulnerability with the patients, they begin to also model that back to you in their lives, and it helps them work through their issues. I think NPs have a really interesting role in this healthcare setting. And so what have you noticed is the most interesting aspect of NP as psychiatric providers? What benefit does it have to see an NP?
Okay, I will answer that, but I'm having an ADHD moment where I feel like I need to say something else, because I think that, okay, just to show, for an example, I think that you've been podcasting for 3 years, right, Dr. Sandra? Okay, so
Correct.
I tried podcasting for a little bit this last year, and I said yes to a lot of things. Anyway, it petered out a little bit. And will I do a podcast in the future? Maybe. But anywho, all that to say, you have experience doing this, right? And so even during our interview right now, as I'm talking, you had sent me some questions we might go over, but like, are you reading through that checklist, as I'm answering these questions? No. you're like reflecting back to me. You're using these therapeutic techniques that like helps me to feel comfortable, helps me to feel like I can tell my story. But I'm sure, I don't know, I could go back and look at my initial podcast. I think I just was quiet because I was like, and I did that too in clinicals too, where I just stayed quiet because I was like, I'm going to say the wrong thing. But I was like, oh, Rachel seems to know what she's doing more. But, I didn't feel confident or comfortable as a newbie, right? We don't in these new roles. I think it just kind of shows the value of like sometimes things that might seem like simple, but like, yeah, reflective listening, being able to repeat back to somebody what they're saying for clarification, like the power of that can be really, really monumental. So anyway, back to your question. What was your question again? Repeat it to me one more time.
Well, and I have to respond to that. In my therapeutic of effectiveness, I have to respond to what you just said and say, thank you. I didn't even realize I was doing that. I just honestly, I love connecting with people and I love hearing people's stories. And so it just exudes. I just can't help it. It's just like a thing. I have to flex that muscle because every time I'm like, okay, so tell me more, because I am just super curious about where you are in your journey as a Psych NP. What I was wanting to share with our listeners was that, the unique role that Psych NPs have and the specialness that they bring to the system. And if you could delineate kind of what it is so why not become a psychiatrist? Why not become a psychologist? Like, what is it that's so special about the Psych NP role that you've been able to see in your time to go, no, this sets us apart. Like NPs just do this part better and we do this part well. And this is why it's good to come see us. This is why we're important to this whole system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think the collaborative nature of the approach that we take in most cases really is kind of what sets us apart. I think we're just like, again, hardwired to kind of collaborate with our patients. And I think that in this specialty, especially, it's key. It's key to feel like as the patient, you have a voice, your voice actually matters, like your story is valid. And I think that we do that. I think we do that really well. I think that people give us the benefit of the doubt too, just from being nurses and having that track record. But I think that even in real time, once we're working with patients, like, and being true to that, like, it's a stressful job. So I could see where it could be very easy to kind of get more into, and I've had those times where I'm not as collaborative and I am stressed out and I am more like defensive and letting my own stuff kind of impact treatment. And it does, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think the self-awareness of like that we are people too. This is a spectrum. Like we're not perfect. It's not like, I just read a book actually by Dr. Jessie Gold, who is a psychiatrist, who talked about her own experiences and hearing about some of the experiences she had in med school and some of the messages that she received in terms of, show up if you're sick, or like, she gave examples of other like, residents and things like that. And I was just thinking like, I'm grateful that I didn't have additional like pressures and stress in that way to put on this facade that I was already used to putting on, this mask of like, I have it all together. It's fine. Look at me. I'm functioning. I get good grades. Like, but I was really struggling underneath the surface. And so that book was really cool. Check it out if you guys want. It's called How Do You Feel? Yeah. But it kind of brings that human approach to and I just think that we do that really well as Psych NPs, is like just bringing that human touch.
So when we have what we do well, and then we have our challenges, right? The unique challenges to being a Psych NP. And maybe you can touch on those things that you've noticed. You even brought something up, being a nurse. Sometimes it's a challenge, right? I think nurses, they do themselves. I think it's because we're a woman-dominated field. I think because we're in this kind of subservient nurse to doctor position that we always kind of feel not as valuable, not as, contributory to the system as a whole. So what are some of the challenges? We have this to look forward to, but we have this to kind of realize we're going to have to overcome. Yeah. And what have you noticed?
That's a great point. I think one of the things that I struggled with personally was the assertiveness aspect. It's like, yes, we want to be collaborative, but also like we want to bring expertise. And if they can sense from us that we're uncertain about their treatment plan, I shouldn't say like, it's okay not to know everything, and you don't have to pretend like you know everything. But I just mean like your general sense of like being, if it feels very uncertain, and that's going to cause insecurity and fear in them. So like being able to like be assertive and present the information in a confident way. Even if that is saying like, you know, I'm going to look this up later. I'm not 100% sure, but still like how kind of you come off instead of like, I think I was just so used to showing up in that like that deference of like respecting, and you do obviously need to respect your patients, but at the same time, you're the one who's gone to school for this and they are coming to you for your expertise. So that can be a challenge. Other challenges can be that our schooling is not standardized and during the pandemic.
Say it, girl. Don't say it. Say it, Lindsay. You're holding stuff back.
Yeah, I am because I'm like, I hate talking about this sometimes because it's like, you know, sometimes can like, it's hard to know how to talk about it because that's DBT talks about two things can be true, you know, and that's definitely the case in this situation. But one of the things that's true is like, we do need to do better in terms of like the standardization, some of the programs that have been out there. I think that unfortunately some of the for-profit like schools have been lenient. And I just think that people out there have said things about Psych NPs and continue to say things. And there's validity to aspects of that. And that's hard as a profession. It's hard to feel misunderstood and to feel sometimes like put down or like, you know, like that people don't feel that your training is adequate or that you know what you're saying, you know, can be challenging. So I think that's important to like show our commitment to excellence, you know, to get involved in advocacy, policy stuff where we can, to do what we can to kind of like raise that commitment to excellence and not just kind of hold ourselves to a certain standard.
Yeah. And again, I think I have two thoughts on that, and I'm just going to touch on them briefly. I think one, getting that doctoral level of education for nurse practitioners is a step in that direction. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it necessarily meets all and ticks all the boxes, but I definitely think it is a big step into kind of keeping a standard of excellence. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that master's prepared nurse practitioners are not as equal or none of that. It's irrelevant. I think the standardization of this is the standard in order to be an NP. It's not varied. It's not all over the place. It's not this. It's not diploma. It's this.
Right.
And that's going to take us time to get there.
Right.
So that part I get. But then the other part that you're speaking about, which is, you know, growing professionally, staying hungry to learn, that doesn't end the day you become an NP, right? The day you become an NP and the day until today, the NP that you are at these different spots is going to be different.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just be real about it. Is different than the seasoned attending.
Yeah.
And it's the same process for all of us. So I think from a standpoint of, hey, listen, we're all in learning, but the point is we have a standard of excellence that we determine this is the standard in order to be here. That's a level playing field for everyone. But then also saying that among that continuum, we're going to be at different stages, and that's normal. Okay. What's not normal is the NP that never moves. That NP that never moves from right here, this knowledge base, that's a problem. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see what I'm doing with my hands. If not, you'll look crazy and you're not going to understand what I'm saying. But this NP is in a different spot, right? And so you just have to realize that this journey that we're on to get to this self-actualized NP is going to take us time. And that change, that's variable for everyone. And so I hear what you're saying. And I think the question to that is, well, then how do you stay hungry? How do you keep improving and learning and becoming that NP that at the end of their career can really show the growth from where they started? I think that's the line. That should be the measure instead of, because I don't want the brand new medical doctor for this type of surgery. I want the seasoned attendant, you know? And so there's nothing wrong with saying that, right? And I think that's kind of to your point. I don't know. So how do you stay hungry? How do you stay learning? What do you do to keep yourself up to date on the cutting edge stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think community helps. Like when you're involved in a community, I think it helps like just with like reducing burnout. I think when you're burned out, it's hard to have energy to really like put in anything to. I think for me too, having things that I'm doing that kind of have some creativity to them and really are things that like I'm interested in, like, and not just like going through the motions of like, I work for somebody else and I'm doing things because they're telling me to do things, but saying like, what am I interested in? What do I want to do? What's getting me really excited? Like, what have I been up studying? You know what I mean? Even if it's not Psych NP things. And how do I kind of like use that to like get my spark going again? Because if you're just kind of like feeling so blah, like you're not going to be super excited. And I've been there, where I'm just like not into it, not into the continuing ed and not into the conferences. And if I go, like not into trying to really learn much while I'm there, like I've been there, very burned out before. So I think that that's important to be able to like use those, the creative side of us. And I'm not somebody who's like super artistic and artsy and create. I'm really not, but I did realize after I had my son and I went through a period where I was very burned out and I got into like taking pictures of him. And I just realized like there's this aspect of like this creativity that I'm like missing. It's got me like really stagnant. And so how can I try to have more of an expression of, that creativity, even though I've been kind of told like, oh, you're not really creative. And I kind of just like bought that. I'm like, no, I do have creativity. And how do I let that kind of like be a part of who I am? And then also just drive like the passion of like the things that actually excite me. Because that's what I want to be doing are the things that actually really excite me, because that's when I do a good job. You know what I mean? When I'm excited.
Yeah.
So
no, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's important. But then I also think that kind of going back to our conversation, like just being mindful of the questions that, if you're considering becoming a Psych NP, what's the fastest way to become a Psych NP? What's the easiest way? Like these questions sometimes that come up, just being mindful of like how that can reflect on our community and kind of trying to reframe a little bit of like, how can I be an excellent Psych NP? Maybe that is the master's route. And that's great. My sister became a Psych NP after I became a Psych NP and she did the master's route and she's a great Psych NP. But I think I think just like with the pandemic and some of these programs and like just not holding standards, it's been more and more of that of just like kind of like, how do I get my, and so I don't know, maybe you should delete this out later. I don't know, but I'm just saying like, it's not good. And we really need to like, just realize that like it is serious what we're doing and how we're helping patients. Yes. And so like trying to advocate for yourself to have good clinical experiences and find a program that's reputable that helps with that clinical placement and where people can tell you like that they had a great clinical experience and had a good school experience. Like I would find a reputable program.
I hear your frustration and I echo. I'm not going to delete this because I think it's like raw, it's real. Mm-hmm. And I've actually said that the standard is different. And so it's kind of hard to take a field seriously when they don't really know seriously what it is. What is it? What are you? And so you need to be firm on what you are and what it looks like, which is why I thought this conversation was important so that people can see what it is to be a Psych NP. If those people are considering those things, that they can see, no, this is what it can look like. It can look like me helping other NPs on the side with their careers. It can look like owning my own business. It can also look like being a super present mom and not being burned out and taking photos and enjoying the creativity aspects of my life. Because Lindsay, we're given one life. We're given one shot at this thing. And so you've got to make the most of it. You got to milk it for what you can get out of it. And to be honest with you, I think having real and vulnerable conversations around things that matter, like our career and where we see it going, is important. And so where do you see the future of psychiatric care heading? Like, where do you see it evolving over the years? What do you hope to see from psychiatric nursing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think more standardization, more inclusion of a solid psychotherapy curriculum and clinical experiences into programs would be really awesome. I think more cohesiveness when it comes to being an integrated Psych NP. I think it's become like trendy and it's like, I think what it means to be an integrated psychiatry, I think a lot of us are kind of naturally integrated, but what does that look like in terms of even our programs and getting more training in some of these different areas, if that makes sense? Like, I don't know. It's just, that's confused me too. Like, oh, integrated, functional, like, what does that mean? You pay like $10,000 for a certain program, right? I would like to see that just become more normalized as like just part of becoming a Psych NP is like, learning more like integrated ways to help patients and having that be just like more standardized, I think would be really cool. But I don't know if that's realistic or not. I think it would be helpful because I think some of us are already practicing in that way and trying to learn different ways to be integrated. So I just think that would be helpful. And then just like access to care, I think access to care is huge. I know like in other countries, access to care is better. And sometimes places where even it's more like you would expect it not to be because of geographically or like just how rural it is. And so I think just increasing access to care, but also increasing like earlier interventions as far as more preventative and kind of earlier education when it comes to coping skills and emotions. Like I would love to see that just as a whole in our society, like being normalized and being taught. I think that it would go really, really far. So I'd love to see more people kind of getting involved in that mission. So I guess those are some of the things that I see for our future profession. But also one of the things just personally too, like the diversification of income streams is also something that I'm like very pro for all you psych NPs out there. I think that like that's really been fun for me to diversify things and to mix it up. It's been scary for me because I'm a person who's like, because of having anxiety, like I want to know what to expect. And so I think for so long I just stuck to like, I'm going to work for somebody and then they'll tell me exactly what to do and when to do it. And that's what I'm comfortable with. And so it's been uncomfortable to be like, well, wait, there's more like freedom in this and I have a say and, okay. Yeah. But it's actually really cool and empowering when you embrace it. So
it's so true. And having these conversations with nurses and nurse practitioners, I can't talk about it. And then when I go back to my work, I can't stop talking about it. So it's really hard. And then you get like really addicted to like, well, what else can you do? What else? And so again, just knowing what your options are, that's what this is for. That's why I want to have these conversations is so that more nurse practitioners and NPs can go, really, what can I do with what I've got here? What does this paper allow me to do? And the freedom that you have in this world to build and create is so liberating. There's so much liberation. Yes, it requires an incredible amount of discipline and self-discipline, right? It's me telling myself what to do, not somebody else telling me what to do.
Yep.
And so that becomes the exercise. And we talked about that even on the podcast earlier today, that it's just so incredibly freeing to be able to be in a career that you have those options. And it's not that way with everything that you go into school for. So it's really cool that we chose wisely. So if you would give one piece of advice to an aspiring nurse practitioner to close up the episode, what would you tell her to help them stay motivated and inspired throughout their career?
I would say like network and stay curious. I think that those are huge. Good. Having that sense of community and then like just, never losing that spirit of curiosity and being willing to put yourself out there, and being okay with putting yourself out there before the confidence is there and knowing that like that's going to create confidence. I think it's easy to probably look at things I'm doing and think like, oh, well, maybe it's just because X, Y, and Z, but it's like a lot of it I've just done messy action steps really scared. You know what I mean? Like, that's what a lot of it is. It's just like, just try it, just try it. Like, because the thing that pushed me to do it too is seeing people who had less experience doing it, more confidence and doing a really good job. And I'm like, dang, so intrigued by you. But like, where did you find that confidence? Like, how are you, what I mean? So like, just being like, also like, you don't want to have regrets at the end of your career and be like, man, I wish I would have taken more risks. What if I had done a private practice and I had loved it? So I decided that I'm like, I want to try some of these things. If they don't work out, okay, I'll be proud of myself for trying them. You know what I mean? And then I can always go back to being employed.
Yes. They'll always take you back, open arms. Come back here. Let me tell you what to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a great, great last piece of advice. So I always do a Success NP quote of the day. And I found this one and I thought it was good. Success usually comes to those who are too busy to be looking for it. I thought that was kind of cool by Henry David Thoreau. And then in regards to rapid fire, I do a rapid fire episode where we go through some rapid fire questions and I just shoot and ask you real fast. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready? Okay, let's do it. If you could pick someone to play you on TV, who would it be?
Jennifer Aniston.
Okay, I could totally see that. Yeah.
I didn't want to overthink it because I'm an overthinker. Yeah. So I just was like, just say. But it's funny because it's actually funny because I have heard some things about like maybe her character, but who knows? Who knows what's true and what's not? But I just think she's like, talented and pretty. And
play me in a movie. That sounds good. Yeah.
Why not?
Who would you give a book to somebody? If there's a book you could give to somebody every single time, what would it be?
Oh, every single time.
Like a book that you're like, this one I give out all the time. This one's one that's just a go-to. You are, this one's it.
Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, stop. That one's...
You've read it? I love that.
So good.
Look at you, Dr. Sandra.
I think I've read it and I was like, this is one that needs to be read yearly. You need this yearly.
I know.
He's so bright. He's a psychiatrist.
Yeah, I need to actually I need to do like a book club. Oh yeah, just what I need to do is something. I'm trying to not just like do random things. Be more intentional. But I do want to reread this year. We'll put it that way.
So good. Such a good book. And then the last question that I asked is, what is the best age to be? Given your whole life, looking back, what would you say is a good year to be or a good age to be?
Well, I think I'm 34 right now. And I think it's a great age. I'm loving being 34 because I'm just like more and more confident in like being who I am and not just feeling like I need to be a people pleaser and be something for other people. And I think it's taken me a lot longer than maybe the average person to figure out my identity and be comfortable with just kind of not being codependent and being like, this is who I am and that's okay. And that's enough. And it might not just because I receive a criticism that doesn't take away my worth. I love that. Go ahead. Yeah. I'm loving where I'm at right now.
Yeah. I love that. So my last guest said the exact same thing. And I feel like the 30s are really good for that. Your 30s are just that space where you just kind of start to go like, this is me, like Greatest Showman. This is me. Like, look out, here I come. Like, this is just who I am.
Yeah.
And I think having children does that too. There's a level of like,
I think you're right.
Like your mom, like I call it my mom bush. So like when I first had Benji, like I had a shrub, like with one little vein that I planted in the ground and like it started getting like little leaves. And then as you get like more motherhood, it starts to like grow into like a mom bush, however you guys are going to take it. But I call it my little mom bush. It's a shrub, it's a bush, it's a hedge, it's like growing. And then like you meet these moms that are like live oaks and you're like, oh my gosh, like look at your mom bush, it's growing. So I just feel like that's something that I have been able to like grow and it's never done. It's never done by any means. There's probably still a shrub compared to so many others, but I just feel like, the more I agree with you, the more my bush grows.
I agree with you.
The more your bush grows.
I totally agree with you because I think that actually when I started making kind of some big moves, it was after I had my son. I'd also had a traumatic brain injury. So I think I was a bit more like impulsive and more irritable. I mean, no, I know I was. So like, but I do think that it kind of pushed me to kind of go like, mix things up a little bit. Mix it up.
Don't be so afraid. Like that came out of you, you know?
Boy, did it. Yeah. Because I've just always been an agreeable person, and I've learned that people are like, you're kind of intense, like professionally. Like you have, I've heard these things, like, or like with my sister, she's my older sister, but she's been in Psych NP less years than me. She's like, you're intense when it comes to like the things that you're passionate. And I'm less afraid to be to have those convictions, I guess. I think that comes with owning a business. I think that comes with like realizing that you can generate your own income. It kind of gives you like, again, like your mama bush, like woman bush gets bigger. And then there's these like pivotal moments where it's just like, whoa, that tree just grew a bunch. And it was because I just did this thing that was scary. And, I never felt it more than when I was having my daughter via VBAC. And they were like, okay, time to go. It's time to go. Your first case now. And I was like, slow down. I told the nurses, slow down. And it was like, that bush went like, and then it was like, oh wait, she's coming. Okay, we're going to try to let her. And so it's just this growing, right? The bush grows in these different things. Yeah. And so, anyway, guys, you guys are going to give me a ton of messages about the bush. But anyway, it is what it is. This is just something I've coined right now on the spot. Dr. Lindsay. Trademark it.
Marking this right now. Hashtag Mom Bush. SNP. All right, guys. Well, that's way too much fun. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thanks.
Where can people find you? How do they locate you, see all the things you're involved in?
Yeah. My handles on social media are Psych NP CEO right now. They're subject to change. But Psych NP CEO, come find me there. And I have like my link tree that has different links to like the boot camp, the network. Come hang out with us and get involved. We're fun in what we're doing. And we have a good time. We laugh. We don't take ourselves too seriously. So like get involved with that, because it is an intense profession, and you need laughs, you need fun, you need like strong relationships and community.
Well, guys, thanks for hanging out. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Sandra.